All right, real happy to talk with the next gentleman on the Sports Card Shop guest line here on Sports Card Nation. He does a very popular YouTube countdown and other content as well. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Al from Iconic Baseball, the Sports Card Nation. Welcome.
Thank you. You're mentioned this. I am a longtime listener of your podcast and love all your stuff. And I want to thank you for your service to the hobby.
Well, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Al. Coming from you, even all the more meaningful. Like I've always said, right? We're in this hobby together. It's a fraternity. I'm old, so I've been in it a long time. I don't know if that's good or bad. I think it's good, but I just tried to give back as much as I can and educate as much as I can. But at the end of the day, right, it's about having fun. The hobby's an outlet to enjoy, and hopefully, I think we all are contributing in that fashion, and that's what it's about. Kind of start off out kind of the basics. First time on the show. Uh, Question. I'm pretty familiar with it, but for those that don't know, kind of your start in the hobby. Where did it all begin, and to get you where you are now?
Sure, John. I'm a lifer. I've been in it for a long time. I think I started the first significant accomplishment in the hobby for me was completing the 1989 Panini sticker album, which I'll just put up a little example of that album. It was one of those albums where you would buy packs of stickers and then paste them in the album and try to complete the entire album. And I'm pretty proud to say that 8 year old me completed that album. Every sticker is in there. I probably didn't have the same motor coordination as I do now, so some of them are a little bit sideways. But that was really the first big accomplishment in the hobby for me was my Panini sticker album in 1989, and then that's about the same time where I was buying 89 tops packs and starting my young journey into the hobby. And it's just really it's been there my entire life. Sometimes in the foreground, sometimes more in the background, but it's one of those things that it's always been there. I've never taken a break, quote unquote, from the hobby. It's always just kind of been either more in the foreground, maybe more in the midground, or maybe more in the background at times in my life. Like when I was working my way through grad school, it was more in the background, but I was still looking, like I was still seeking out key items for my collection the whole time. I just wasn't as active in the hobby. And then, really, once the pandemic hit, I discovered this. I discovered all this whole YouTube, podcasts, all this, the community that existed out there. I didn't really discover that even existed until about 2020. And that's when I started digging into these podcasts when I pretty much couldn't practice as a physical therapist for about 2 months while our clinic was closed and we were waiting to reopen. And so during that time, I dug in to some of these podcasts and YouTube channels. And I thought to myself, well, that's amazing. And this is a community of people that love a hobby that I love and have loved my entire life. I want to be part of this. So I decided during that time to start my own channel. And that's what you see. It's basically I'm a collector with a lot of passion, and I like to think a good amount of focus. And what I'm trying to do is just translate that out into the world. And so maybe someone could be inspired by it. Obviously, everyone collects different, but that's the story.
Well, listen, and you do your YouTube, which is excellent. We're definitely gonna deep dive into that as well. I know you're in the Colorado area
Yep.
now, but originally from Pittsburgh, so you are a Pirates fan. I got to
Yep.
pick on you a little bit. Probably not the year for me to pick on you being a Mets fan. We had a terrible season, but Pirates
Yeah.
in recent times not super successful, kind of known as a small market team. And then you're in Colorado, and the Rockies kind of have that same sort of feel. But like I said, I'm a Mets fan, so this is probably not the year to pick on anyone else's fandom. But you love baseball as I
Yeah.
do, and it doesn't have to be relegated to one team necessarily. And you put this you're in the probably I think you're in the 20s now on your
Yep.
top 100 players in baseball. You're doing a great job with it. I know we talked a little bit before
Thank
we
you.
hit record. Making lists isn't as easy as people think because especially a thorough one. And when
Hmm.
you do the episodes, you're really deep diving into the players' accolades, accomplishments, how they compare to the compadres in certain categories, and it's more educational besides your opinion of where they should rank, right? And you know
Yeah.
how this goes. Whenever anyone does a list, whether it's college football rankings and the bowl championship series, people are going to debate or argue that this person or this college should be ahead of this one, and or this player should be ahead of this one. How much of that do you get? Like, do you get like some vitriol from some like diehard fans? Like, hey, you dissed my guy here,
Yeah, vitriol, no, and that's good. I mean, we don't need vitriol,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, sure. There's occasionally someone who's like, "Oh, I would have had him higher, or I would have had him lower," but generally, it's agreement or just general positive comments on "nice job on the episode." I love that rookie card that you showed, or that's a beautiful autograph that you showed on that episode. So it is just largely 99% positive. And then so I don't view disagreements as negative. I just think that's why I'm putting this out there because I want to start conversations like that. Like, oh, if you think that Hank Greenberg was better than Eddie Murray, you can make that case. And there's someone else out there that wants to make that case that Eddie Murray was better than Hank Greenberg. And neither of them are wrong, but it depends on what you value. If you like a peak talent, um, then it's Hank Greenberg. But also, you have this amazing cultural significance to the Jewish community that's separate and only adds to his legacy. Eddie Murray was a compiler, so he didn't have those amazing eye-popping totals. He didn't win an MVP award. He didn't have those amazing season totals. But if you look at what Eddie Murray did over a 20-year career, he's one of the few that hit 500 home runs and 3,000 hits. So you can make the case that he's up there with Hank Greenberg, and Hank Greenberg's up there with Eddie Murray, and it's just a matter of what do you value more.
Yeah, and the other thing I appreciate with your programming, Al, is showing those cards as well. You've got the,
Mm-hmm.
the hobby aspect in there, and you're doing your research. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
You're not just saying, "Hey, this guy's next on the list." You're really putting in the work, and it's becoming I've learned stuff. I'm sure you've learned stuff yourself in the
Oh yeah.
process of putting the list together. I'm not going to nitpick. I only have two
Okay.
things that stand out from your list again, because again, it's all beauty's in the eye of the beholder, as the
Yeah. Let me
cliche
have it,
goes.
John. Give it to me.
All right. The first one is the first one, right? Number 100, Michael
Uh-huh.
Jordan.
Yep.
Listen, I Michael Jordan might be the greatest athlete to
Right.
walk the face of the earth. I won't, but if it's a baseball list,
Uh-huh.
probably doesn't make my top 100. If
I
it's
get that.
top athletes of all time, any sport,
Yeah.
he might be number one. So
Hmm.
but I'll have you kind of, you heard my kind of take on it. What say you?
Yeah, and I totally get that argument. And I think on the episode, it's my first video that I ever made on YouTube. About 2 years ago that I posted that video. It was extremely awkward, and the video was horrible, horrible in every respect. But the reason Michael Jordan squeaks onto my top 100 list as a baseball player is really just because my list is the greatest and most iconic. And I tried to come up with some grand formula to rank players on my scale, but what I realized as I tried to do that is you have the quantitative, which is easy to sort of categorize, but then you have the qualitative, which is almost, if not impossible, to quantify because it is qualitative by definition. And so you have these guys that have various levels of iconic status. Let's call it iconicity. And that affects how high they are on the list. For example, Jackie Robinson has a much higher level of iconicity than Jim Thome, and Jim Thome actually has a higher WAR than Jackie Robinson. Um, Jackie Robinson's very high on my list. Jim Thome didn't make my list. So it's not just about the quantitative. If it was about the quantitative, then Jim Thome would be ranked higher than Jackie Robinson, but he's not. And so Michael Jordan, to get back to this point, is a 100 out of 100 in terms of iconic status. And so just by virtue of who he is and his status in the hobby and in popular culture, apparel, footwear, jerseys, like everything about everything puts Michael Jordan just high enough that I don't really care that he never played Major League Baseball. He hit 200 in the minors for a season. Stole 32 bases though. Anyway, he did enough to me to show that he did play baseball. He has baseball rookie cards. He has baseball items, enough for me to squeak him on to number 100.
I won't argue that. You're right on all those points. Like you show a picture of Michael Jordan to almost anybody on this planet, there's
Yeah,
very few people who won't name him. And they won't even, you
exactly.
don't even have to be a sports fan per se. He just has that sort of, whether it's like you said, from the footwear and the Nike
Yeah,
deal, the commercials and the dream team success, obviously championships in the NBA, and all that stuff. Very few people would not recognize, Michael Jordan.
yeah,
Including, he's one of those guys too, Al, that he's one of those transcendent type of athletes where even kids that are 10 years old who were not even close to being around during his playing day know who Michael Jordan is. It's
yeah.
almost like a
It's a
rite of
generational, yeah, it's a generational reverence that will continue to, you know, probably just like a snowball rolling down a hill. It'll probably just continue to pick up steam as generations go, much like Babe Ruth has picked up steam. And there's really no fall off on Babe Ruth items. And I don't see Babe Ruth losing prominence anytime soon. But yeah, he's just a generational figure.
Yeah, no doubt. So much so that my son Jordan, who's now 23, uh,
Hmm.
is named after Michael Jordan. So there you
There you
go.
go.
His name is Jordan Newman. So
Nice.
there you go. So I'm not picking on Jordan. I just, when you're thinking of a baseball list, maybe he's not the
Right.
first, but everything else she said is dead on, and he's just, we're making an all time greatest athlete. He's arguably would
Hmm.
be on a lot of people's list at number one. The only
Which is
other,
why,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
which is why on every video I make it clear that it's greatest and most iconic. It's not just greatest. If it was just
Yeah,
greatest, he obviously wouldn't be on the list. If you're just looking at the greatest baseball players, he wouldn't be on the list. It's greatest and most iconic, and it's in that gray. It's that gray combination of the two is where I formulate my ranking. Sorry, didn't
and
mean to interrupt you.
it's got to be iconic. It's iconic baseball, the show, right?
Yeah,
You got to be
exactly.
iconic. So it would have to. It couldn't be any other way. The only other nitpicking I'll do is at number 51. And maybe this is more me than the
Uh-huh.
player itself, but Alex Rodriguez. I
Sure.
thought that was. I'm not saying Alex Rodriguez is terrible. We can get into the whole performance enhancing stuff. We won't, but other than mentioning it, I just thought that was sort of high
Uh-huh.
for him. I'm if I did this list, which I haven't and probably won't, I don't know if he even makes my 100. I don't want to say
Hmm.
he wouldn't until I like really late until I would lay out all those names, right?
Yeah.
But I thought when I saw it 51, I'm like that kind of caught me off guard. I guess I'll
Sure. Yeah,
say
and
it
I've
that way.
had a couple comments like that. He was maybe the hardest guy to rank because at least with Bonds and Clemens, we have a track record where we surmise that they were clean for a good portion of their career. So we know that Bonds won 3 MVP awards clean. We know that Roger Clemens won 3 Cy Young awards clean, and we had a pretty good idea of what their career track was looking like. And there's actually great modeling that I use in my videos for Clemens, and I'm going to use for Bonds that basically it's using this statistical prediction model that, with an 8 or 9 year sample size, and given their age progression, you can basically project what kind of career they would have had they not enhanced during the time where we know they enhanced. So it basically just follows this normal bell curve of how players generally age and how their numbers generally act as they get older. And I think it's great. It's a great way to at least wrap your head around the kind of players that they really would have been, or would have the totals that they would have achieved had they not enhanced. With A-Rod, we can't do that really, because we don't know. We don't know when he started. We don't know when he was or wasn't. And so it's like this big open question. The career totals are obviously eye-popping and huge, but yeah, and we can't take them at face value. So the best I could do was sort of handicap him by about 25 WAR, put him down a few seasons worth of production, basically from where he ended up, at least a few seasons worth, probably 4 seasons worth of production, down from where he ended up. So again, it's a very hard thing to do. He was probably the hardest guy to rank.
Yeah, and I'm nitpicking. Maybe I'm just because I'm not a huge A Rod guy, and I'm thinking of like him yelling at people trying to catch pop ups in the infield, and
Yeah.
sort of all the even the off the field persona and that. But and I'm glad you mentioned with Bonds and Clemens. They were. We can make the argument. I don't even think it's an argument now. I think they
Yeah.
were Hall of Famers. If they
Agreed.
retired before they started using, those
Mm-hmm.
numbers would get them in the Hall. And that's the sad part. That's the tragic
Yep.
part for them is no one's really arguing that they aren't Hall of Famers. It's just the fact that they use, and that's what's preventing them from
Yep.
getting in. And it's sad because they were locks before that all that
Yeah.
other stuff
Yeah. But then
went
again, they're
down.
adults. They're adults. They knew what they were doing. They decided to put something in their bodies to enhance, and so they're kind of dealing with the consequences. The way I come down on it is I don't care so much about Hall of Fame status. I really don't. I think it's overblown. Just because Shoeless Joe is not in the Hall of Fame and probably never will be, does not make me not want Shoeless Joe items any less, or not want Pete Rose items any less. I still consider Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, and Barry Bonds essential figures in the history of baseball. And so it really doesn't affect the way I collect, or I know there are a lot of Hall of Fame collectors out there that, the moment a guy gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, all of a sudden they're rushing out and buying Minnie Minoso cards, but that's not me. For me, if they weren't a guy that I was interested in collecting before, then their Hall of Fame status is not important to me, really.
Yeah, that's a great point. You see that, right? You see that
Yeah.
every time that happens. You didn't, no one hit another home run or stole
Right.
another tag.
Oh,
You
now I
know,
need Gil
that,
Hodges all of a sudden.
yeah. And see, I'm being from Brooklyn. I'm already a Gil Hodges guy,
Exactly.
but
You already had your Gil Hodges. You weren't running
yeah,
out and buying Gil Hodges. You had Gil Hodges already because
yeah, you're
you're a
just
Brooklyn guy.
hoping that that day would come. At least for his family. He's no
Yeah.
longer with us, but Griffey at 24, one of my favorite players. When we talk about that era of performance enhancing,
Hmm.
he played right in the middle of that. Frank Thomas is another name that comes to mind,
Yep.
um, and that you never hear mentioned as users. And so the fact that they put up some of the numbers and accolades they did is I can make. I don't have a problem with Griffey at 24 and it matches his jersey number, but
Yeah, which kind
I
of
can make.
I didn't mean to do that, and it kind of angered me a little bit because it's almost like it was intentional, and I didn't want to give a guy an arbitrary ranking because of his number, but that's just how it came out. I really believe that Griffey is number 24, and he didn't fit higher or lower. He just belongs at 24, which okay.
Yeah, and I won't argue that ranking. I think it's probably pretty close. I probably, because I like him maybe a lot more than I should. I probably would have pushed him up a little higher, but that would have been just the Newman bump. I'm not saying it was fair, but it's probably
Right.
something I
But if
would
you're
have
pushing him
I
higher,
would
then
have.
you're pushing him over DiMaggio. And then if you push him again higher, then you're pushing him over Clemente. So it's like I had
Yeah,
a hard time pushing Griffey over Clemente or DiMaggio.
I gotta imagine the 1 to 50 was harder than the 51 to 100. Would you agree with that?
Um, hard, yeah, yeah. I mean, the 1 to 50 were like slam dunk guys. I think they're,
As far as the order, I mean, not so much
yeah,
that they're in the top 50, but then the actual order. I think
hmm
because then it's more you're gonna know people are gonna talk more about the first 50 than
yeah,
necessarily the back 50. So I think it gets trickier, like because I think more eyes are gonna be on the as you get closer in the countdown. You know what
hmm
I mean? People are gonna probably complain more. If someone is in the back 50 and you have them 79th instead of 60,
yeah. It
you
doesn't
might get
matter as
some
much. Yeah,
complaints. But
yeah,
in the front 50, if you have someone, 30th and someone believes they should be like 18th, they might get a little more
yeah.
animated about it or strongly opinionated
Oh, I know there's one
about
coming that people are going to be mad about, but that's okay. I mean, it's it's going to be a top 10 omission that people are going to be like, "Oh man, how could you not have him in your top 10?" And I just know it's coming, but I'm bracing for it, so that's good.
Yeah, and that's what's fun about these lists now, right?
Yeah.
You can't win the whole room, but I think, and I'll say this for you, I think you've won the majority of the room, and that's
Thank
I
you,
think
sir.
that goes into your research and your deep diving and the due diligence when putting these lists together. That it's not
And this
just
was,
hey, it took 5 minutes, and
yeah.
here's my 100. It's more to it than that. And even talking to you about it, even you can tell, and that's the sort of thing. You're a storyteller with your videos, and you love the history of the game. Were you always
hmm
like that? Were you like that as a young kid, a young man?
Yeah. Always had a passion for baseball, and in fact, I remember, I think it was my senior year, or I think it was in high school at some point. Um, I did a project on Forbes Field, and it was like you had to set up a whole display and have a booth. And so I went down to the Carnegie Library in Pittsburgh, did a bunch of research. I was printing out microfiche and pulling out old articles and Xerox copying old newspapers. And I even took like one of these crayon rubbings of the actual site of Forbes Field in Pittsburgh, and I set up this whole display presenting the history of Forbes Field back in high school. So yeah, it goes way back.
And listen, I love that stuff, right? I try to do the
Yeah.
same thing when it comes to the hobby. I try to learn and teach it at the same time, and I think that says a lot about you when you're like that, and it's instilled in you, and it's just a good reflection of you. And even like I said already, what you do in this list, it wasn't like you just wrote 100 names and took a couple hours, and
No.
here you go, and
Been many years.
yeah, and that's I think other people might take the shortcut way and teach their own, but you can tell you did your due diligence and lots of homework here, and that you're passionate. Not only did you do it, but you're passionate about it as well, right? You
Well,
you can
thanks, John.
tell,
That means a lot coming
yeah,
from you.
yeah, you can tell when you're doing the videos, like you really you love what you're talking about, and care, and that's half the battle right there. Thoughts on the hobby now. Well, let me start off with a national question.
Mhm.
I saw your national reviews, and the national, I call it the Super Bowl, the hobby. It's a great
Yeah.
event, as you pointed out. You get to meet people you like and admire, and just in again in that fraternity that we're all in. There's been every once in a while you hear a rumor that they're going to do two a year. We know Fanatics has announced they're going to start doing their own sort of shows and events. What that looks like uh, remains to be seen. Your thoughts, just kind of on the show landscape, the possibility of two nationals, although I'm being told it's probably not likely, but you hear rumblings every so often. Kind of your thoughts on what I just kind of mentioned.
Yeah, I've heard your thoughts on it, and I agree with you on the national thing. I think two nationals in a year kind of dilutes it. It makes it less special. I don't want two nationals like I don't want two Super Bowls. Like I think you said that exact line on one of your other episodes. And yeah, to me, the national is sacred. Now that I've been to a couple, and it's special, and I make a special point to go if at all possible, and I will in the future. But if there were two nationals, I just think it would dilute the whole thing. It would make it a little less special. Um, so then I'd have to pick, okay, which national do I want to go to this year? Or I don't know, it just wouldn't be quite the same feeling. And in terms of Fanatics, and I think it might be a nice burst of energy to the hobby. At least that's what I hope it is. It's kind of, I think local shows can get kind of stale at times. Maybe a little bit of pizzazz, maybe a little bit of energy, a little bit of innovation could be good for the show space, especially to bring in the next generation of collectors. And yeah, so it'll be really interesting to see what they do. But I am looking forward to that, to see what Fanatics show or what a Fanatics show might look like.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to say the least. I'm a little guarded, I guess, I don't work for the National or anything
Hmm.
like that. I have no skin in the game other than loving to go to it and enjoying the whole pageantry of the event itself. I guess I'm more concerned like is Fanatics going to put on, I joked even before they made their announcement of doing shows like they were buying everything up. I'm like they probably should just buy the National and then call it the
Right.
Fanatical, a
Yeah.
little tongue in cheek. But like
Yeah.
that being said, though, now that they've announced it, are they going to try to rival the National and sort of do a competing show and whatever they call, whether it is the
Hmm.
Fanatical or something else? I just, I just, the same reason I don't want two Nationals, right? Because it takes that bloom off the rose, as they say. I'm hoping, yeah, listen, it's America. People can, promoters can start a new show. That happens on the local level all the time. I'm not telling someone you can't do that. I just hope they don't oversaturate it where it does hurt the National or lessens
Hmm.
the National. If they could do
Yeah.
it where it doesn't change that dynamic and they add something to the show landscape, then that's I guess that's what I'm hoping for. I've garnering from your answer, I think you feel the same way.
Yeah, I feel like like a Fanatics show might resemble more of a Comic-Con type of show. At least that's the feeling that I would get. Maybe a little bit more interactive, maybe, more bright lights and shiny things and things that kids can do and stuff like that. Whereas I feel like the National is the National. It's going to be, you know, dealers with great cards. And that's what I love. Like connect with the community and see some great cards. And honestly, if Fanatics put on one big Fanatical every year that was more like a Comic Con, I probably wouldn't be as into it. But there
Yeah.
would be there would be a segment of hobbyists that would be, and so maybe the younger generation gravitates toward the Fanatical and then finds their way over to the National eventually. But if we're getting some new people into the hobby, some younger folks into the hobby through the Fanatical, that eventually make their way to the National, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, I think both parties can exist if it's again done in the right way, and I think they've mentioned that, Al, that's kind of like going to be like their approach
Hmm.
and that sort of thing. I think the probably the biggest threat to the National is probably the National itself. If they were to do two
Hmm.
shows, I think then they water down their
I agree.
product a little bit. So maybe it's probably not Fanatics that we need to or they need to worry about, but maybe sort of overdoing a good thing, which we see a lot in a lot of industries. It's not
Yeah.
relegated just to the hobby. So hopefully smart people make push the right buttons and everyone's all the better for it. I know you collect cards that are graded, as do I. Um, kind of thoughts on the current landscape. We during that pandemic we had the backlog. We're obviously past that point now. we've seen prices come down, and longer return times settle down. Kind of your thoughts on grading?
I think we're kind of back to an equilibrium. It seems like where prices are sort of at a natural resting place. Maybe specials come and go here and there, but it seems like the $20 grading price, I think, is about where it needs to be. I think cheaper for SGC, which is also great. That there is a quicker turnaround time and a cheaper option. And Beckett, we'll just have to wait and see. I really don't know what's happening with Beckett. I really hope that they can do something. Uh, I don't know if they get acquired or what needs to happen there, but you just kind of see them lagging farther and farther behind, which is it's painful to me because I love Beckett and I grew up in the '90s reading Beckett and revering Beckett, and so the brand matters to me, and so I really want to see it resurge, uh, and we'll just see. But grading itself is a necessary part of the hobby, as I see it. It's sort of like what happened in the coin industry decades and decades ago, before cards were graded. Coin grading really legitimized the coin hobby. I feel like 50 years ago, and that I think that's what's happened in the card industry, where it's become a legitimizing factor and makes it much easier to go out and buy a card online and have confidence that it's authentic and that you are buying what you're buying and not being deceived. So I think it's an important thing for the hobby. Obviously, grading companies make mistakes, and you don't have to just to agree with the grade, but it's a technical grade, which I think is what trips people up. Well, this 6 looks like crap, and this 3 looks amazing. Well, sure, it's a technical grade. It's not saying anything about eye appeal. Nothing. It's literally just telling you the corners, the surface, the various elements of what goes into grading a card. This is the regimented system we have, and it's a 6. It doesn't tell you that it's a good eye appeal 6. That's what you need these for, these eyes.
Yeah.
So I
And
don't know.
maybe we'll see that. Maybe we'll see that in the future. I think
Yeah.
these companies are going to, you know, I'm a subgrade guy. I like them when you can
Hmm.
get them. I think it should kind of be part of the service itself. But it is, and like you, Beckett was the first company I graded cards with.
Yeah.
They've hit some potholes, and I don't want to make this a pick on Beckett episode, but maybe some bad choices of leadership and steering the ship, and I think they're trying to get back on the rails and up to speed. My fear for them is, did they lose too much time and sort of traction where it's not
Hmm.
even going to be possible? But they've got again smart people there. All these companies have smart people in the rooms. You
Yeah.
just whether those voices are being heard or implemented. That's the second part of that equation. But
Yeah.
I don't root against anybody. I don't like to do that. So, but they're a different company than the one we grew up with. I guess that's the nice way
Hmm.
to say it. Can they
Yeah.
get? Yeah,
I remember a time when you'd submit to Beckett, and that was the gold standard. That was the gold standard company.
yeah,
A BGS 9.5 was prized higher than a PSA 10 at one point in the early 2000s. And I remember sending submissions to Beckett just because they had, the highest respect in the hobby. And I have since cracked a couple cards out of BGS 9 slabs that had straight 9 subgrades, and they both of the ones that I cracked out got PSA 10s. So, like, what does that tell you? BGS 9s, I mean, from back in the day, that both crossed over to PSA 10s. I mean, so that's how hard they were grading back then, and how much respect that they were
yeah,
garnering.
yeah. And it's again, the terrain is different. We'll see. And you mentioned a good point. Maybe acquisition is maybe their best hope for
Yeah.
surviving and thriving in the future. I guess only time will tell. A little bit back to the hobby. I know you're heavy, historian and the vintage era of the game, but in today's baseball, who are some of the players? Yeah, I don't want you to give out all the, but who are the
Yeah.
players like you look at today and say, hey, these are the guys that might crack my, this 100 top 100 list if I'm to do it in 20 years from now or 15
Yeah.
years from now. Who are some of these
And this,
younger guys? Go ahead.
yeah, this is how I consider speculation. A lot of people go out and buy prospects, you know, and for me, it's not. I don't prospect in the, I guess, the traditional sense. What I'm prospecting on are guys that could one day crack the top 100. Exactly what you're saying. Um, and guys like right now that fall just below that would be a guy like Bryce Harper, who is very close. I think he might need a few more seasons and a ring to get at that level, but he's extremely close. I think he's compiling the numbers he's going to need, and he's young enough still to where I think he's going to get there. Manny Machado is sort of on the fence. He might get there, but he's going to need a lot more. He's going to need, to have a really good 30s decade. He had a very good productive 20s, but he's just, I'm not sure if he's going to be one of those guys who continues to stay consistent through his 30s, or whether he's one of those guys that really kind of trails off into his 30s. That's what we don't know. But I have a few Machado items. I have a few Harper items. And pretty much whenever it's clear to me that they're going to lean one way or the other, I either kind of hold what I have or double down or slowly sell off if I don't really feel like they're going to be a top 100 name.
Yeah, and that's I used to, we talk about speculating or prospecting.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do more of that when Bowman was a little bit cheaper
Yeah.
as well than in its current iteration. But I think the way you go about it is sort of how I've kind of pivoted and more established. But there's a couple guys like I'm a big Bobby Witt Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
I think they have sort of that it factor, barring the old cliche, the old line, right? Barring injury, I think they're
Yeah.
going to be guys we talk about for years to come. Kind of perennial all stars. May not be with the teams they are with now in the long term. We'll see how that sort of shapes out. But a guy along the lines that is more established that I think so underrated. I kind of want to pick your brain here, Al. And I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about it on the show. I love Trey Turner. I think
Yeah.
like he's name wise he doesn't it's not a huge name in the terms of he's not a guy that's necessarily going to hit 40, 50 home runs like a Bryce
Mm-hmm.
Harper could, but just across the board between average he does hit home runs, drive in runs, and steal bases. Just kind of that 5-2 overall, like across the line. I just think he does it sort of quietly. And I think
Mm-hmm.
when his career comes to an end, I think people are going to be surprised at the numbers they see. To me, again, barring any kind of fall off or injury, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. And I think when that day comes, I think people are going to be like I knew Trey Turner was good. I didn't realize he was this good. I'm one of the
Yeah.
guys that realizes he's this good. That's the
Mm-hmm.
point I'm trying to drive home. Kind of your thoughts on someone like Trey Turner?
Yeah, I think he could sneak up on people like kind of like Jeter did. I feel like about halfway through Jeter's career, I was in the hobby at that point, and my brother and I both collected a little bit of Jeter, but we didn't put him on the same level as a Frank Thomas. We didn't put him on the same level as other guys that are now. I mean, Jeter has kind of left those guys in the dust in terms of his status, what he achieved in the game. But yeah, kind of quiet in a way. Um, didn't put up gaudy numbers and played through the steroid era and never got embroiled in any of the steroid talk. And now you look back and guys like Griffey and Jeter, I mean, they're kind of the standards for the 90s, really. And yeah, it could be. I mean, Trey Turner is not on my radar just because he doesn't seem to be tracking well in terms of his age and his his numbers. I'm not sure how well he's going to age with speed being such a big part of his game. The speed's probably going to trail off, and he's been a little inconsistent. He had a pretty bad first half. I mean, he he didn't hit much in the first half, and I'm just not sure if he's going to be consistent enough, whether his speed is going to play well or age well, and if he'll just ultimately have the numbers and the status to ever. I'm not saying he won't be a Hall of Famer. He might be a Hall of Famer, but that, like I said, that doesn't interest me. Uh, a guy being a Hall of
Yeah,
Famer doesn't really matter to me. It's more, are they going to be one of the top 100 guys? And I don't see it personally.
yeah. I won't argue that. He did have a terrible first half. I'm going to chalk it up to a new location, a new team.
Hmm.
New Jersey. Um, but that's my next question for you too. Is do you think it hurts a guy's status when they wear three, four, five jerseys rather than play with one or two teams, especially
I
one
think
team their whole career, but like
I
minimum at
think it's a consideration. I feel like, I mean, when we think of a guy like Cal Ripken, we think of one team, or a guy like Tony Gwynn, we think of one team. Derek Jeter, one team. I mean, the a lot of the iconic names, we know of them with one jersey on. And yeah, when you kick around of 3 and 4 and 5 different teams, I feel like, yeah, that it takes the shine off a little bit maybe, but just a little bit. I don't
yeah.
fault a guy for playing for multiple teams.
Yeah, I think it comes down, someone asked me that too, and my answer was this. I think if you look at two players and let's say they have similar stat lines at the end, and one did it with one team, maybe two max, and the other
Hmm.
did it with five, six, seven teams, I think you sort of look at the guy that did it with one or two teams, even though the numbers are almost identical or very similar. I think you
Hmm.
look at the guy who did it with one or two teams with more reverence than the guy who sort of bounced around. Because I think whether it's true or not, I think when you see someone play on five, six, seven teams, two trains of thought either come to mind, right? Maybe he's not a good clubhouse guy, so they're not keeping him around for a long
Hmm.
time. Maybe he's just chasing the big payday and it means more to him than staying in one place. And so, whether even if it's not true, I think sometimes we think that about
Yeah.
a player. And maybe they're just trying to get a World Series ring and going to a place that they think is the best way to go about it, rather than the two other things I mentioned. But I think when
Hmm.
a guy does it in one place, two places tops, I think there is a mystique about that, or there's extra credit given, if you will, and probably deserved extra
Yeah.
credit because,
And I think
especially in
that
today's
adds,
day, yeah,
it probably adds to their hobby mojo too, because a guy like George Brett, he's beloved in Kansas City. I mean,
yeah.
people love George Brett because of what he did there. And so if you only played for one team or two teams, that gives you enough time as a player to really solidify a fan base in that city. And so then it just kind of helps. I think you're collecting mojo, more so than someone who was a journeyman.
Yeah, and I think it's subconscious. I
Hmm.
think we just naturally just do it or feel that way without necessarily thinking about it. I just think it's sort of ingrained
Yeah.
as a sport. I don't even want to say baseball. I think we can do that across sports as a sports fan. We have sort of, Jerry Rice is arguably, not even arguably, he's the greatest wide receiver ever to play
Yeah.
the NFL. And I just remember at the end, the Raiders and the Seahawks, and I think there's and it doesn't taint like he's still Jerry Rice, but you still remember that a little bit.
Hmm.
And I almost wish like, hey, you just went out as a 49er. And I'm a Steelers fan, so uh,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean, as a 49er, but just as a fan of the sport. But I think guys who play, like you said, Ripken, Brett, I think it enhances their legacy, where I
Hmm.
think the opposite can kind of, I don't know if tarnish is the right word, but not enhance it as
Yeah.
much when you sort of bounce around. So I was just curious to get your sort of take on it, as someone who loves the sport and a historian of the game. All right, winding down here, Al. Coming up here, hobby magic one. I asked this question. Not every guest gets it. I'm giving it to
Hmm.
you. The hobby
Thank you,
magic
sir.
one. It's not a real thing, but if it was, I hand it to you. You only get what's like a genie instead of three wishes. You only get to use it one time. You
Uh-huh.
can get rid of something. a pet peeve. You can add something, whatever. You only get to swing it one time. What are you
Okay.
doing with the hobby magic wand?
All right. I didn't get very much time to think about this, but the one thing that popped into my mind when you said the question was, I wish we had Upper Deck producing baseball cards again. I miss the Upper Deck designs. I miss the SP designs, the chirography autographs, the various different Upper Deck products that came out in the '90s, especially for me being a '90s kid. So I wish I could wave my magic wand and give Upper Deck a license to produce baseball cards, and then they could do, buybacks again, do SP buybacks, and release new sets of SP with nostalgic designs from the '90s. And I would just love Upper Deck to be back in that game again.
I like that answer. I like that answer, and I agree with you. And they do the hockey. If you see, I review some of their hockey products, for 'em,
Hmm.
some of the really really crazy, nice designs. And when I open the hockey products, I'm like you just said, Al. I'm like, man, this imagine baseball players with these kind of
Yeah,
designs. And I love that. Like you, I grew up in the same. I'm a little older, but grew up in that was in my wheelhouse as well. And I don't know if we'll ever get them again, right? They say you can't go
yeah,
back, but um I agree. I think that's a very good use. It probably, I've never really. I have a lot. I have a lot of. If the wand was real, I'd be using that thing left and
right.
right. But that, what you said would probably be moved up right on my list because I think you
Nice.
hit the nail. I think you hit the nail on the head. I want to mention too what you mentioned in the sticker book that kind of started it all. I started in '79 with a baseball pack, but I remember doing the 1982, and it was
Oh, okay.
Tops sticker books. And you brought this up on your show back, even in '89, but even in '82, you could trade your duplicate stickers
Yes.
and fill in the gaps and the missing stickers. Um,
Yeah, could you
uh,
imagine
you
these
know,
days? You mail cards back to Panini, or you mail cards back to Topps, and
But
like, yeah, you know what?
everyone would want the rookie whatever the flavor of the month
Exactly.
rookie sticker. Like, hey, I'm doing 10 sets. Here's
Yeah,
10 doubles, and I need 10 number 282s of
exactly. Which just
Gunnar
shows you right
Henderson.
there how the hobby has changed in the last 30 years. Is the collector is not as focused now on finishing a set or finishing a sticker book. It's more about stacking the hot rookie or getting the big hit now. So it's just kind of a different world back then.
Yeah, that was my mission. That's crazy, man. Thinking about it even now, 18 to doing math, 41 years ago, that
Hmm.
1982. And I remember
Right.
I'd open the packs and you look at the fronts and then you look at the number in the bag, you go to the book where it would
Yep.
be,
Match it
oh, I
up.
have it already.
Paste it in there.
I
Yep.
have it already. I don't need it. Right? It didn't
Yep.
matter whether it was a superstar. You wanted to complete that book and put them in the book. And like you said, it's a kind of a different hobby now. Still fun, still enjoyable, but the terrain is definitely different. But it's fun to sort of reminisce and go back. And if you didn't live through it, people wouldn't sometimes get
Right.
it or understand it.
I
Or
still love paging through that book. I still get out that sticker album and
I
page
still
through it. And yeah.
so I went in my garage the other day and I still have that thing. It's
Nice.
not it's a little loose. It's not PSA 10 standards,
Yeah,
but
mine isn't either.
it's yeah, it's still the original one, and I got to bring it in. It's in my garage. It's a sealed garage. It's not like it's exposed to the elements, but I got to bring that in. Maybe do something with it content wise, and kind of talk
Yeah,
about
that
it. It
sounds like an
wasn't what
episode.
really, yeah, it wasn't what started it all, but it was the first. I think it was the first time for me, Al, that I was looking to complete something in the
Yeah,
hobby. I think it was the
that's what it
first
was for
set.
me. Yep.
Yeah, because from '79 to '81, I was just collecting cards and trying to get as many. I wasn't putting them necessarily. I would put them by teams and then rubber bands around. So all
Yeah.
like the Oakland A. So I wasn't making sets yet, it was just, keeping them by teams and favorite players, and that 82 sticker book was that first time I like set a goal. Like, my mission is to like get every sticker in this book, and I did it. And so there's something to be said, about that. So I have to dig that out, maybe do something with it. And so hearing you talk about the '89 one, it brings
Hmm.
back memories of the '82 one. It also makes me feel old, which I am, but par
What,
for the
7 years
par for
older?
the
What,
course.
not that much older.
I think I might have a few more years on you, but that's it is what it is. You can't, like my dad says, there's only one way to stop getting older. I don't like that way. So,
Exactly. It's better than the alternative.
so well, I appreciate you coming on. We'll have you back on, and I love chopping up the hobby with you. Give out where people can find everything you're doing, YouTube wise, social media wise, so people can find out if they haven't already. Go backtrack 100 to I think 2021 and see
Yeah.
where you're listed. You have, and it's not you just don't do the list. You do other content as well. I want to make that
Yeah.
clear as well. So
I would
where
I would
people
say
can
the
find all that stuff. Yep. So take your time, give out all that info.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's just Iconic Baseball on YouTube and Iconic Baseball on Instagram. Those are kind of my two platforms. I do an Instagram post at the same time as I post my YouTube video. So if you ever want a closer look at some of the items that I'm showing on my YouTube channel, because I sometimes show them and then they go away, and you're like, oh man, I wish I got a closer look at that card. There's a tandem post on Instagram for every YouTube episode. So you can kind of scroll through all the items that I showed on that YouTube episode on Instagram. So they kind of pair in together. And I guess we're going to be at number 20 next this coming Saturday. So we're getting into the top 20. It's getting exciting. I can't wait to kind of get into these really,
Yeah.
really inner circle iconic names.
Yeah, if you're listening to this on show release day, which is Friday, there you go. Tomorrow, uh,
Yep.
if not sooner or already, check out what Al's doing. Very diligent with the work he puts into these. Lists sometimes are overrated. People can jot them down on a piece of paper real quick. If you said, John,
Hmm.
give me your top 10 baseball players of all time, I could probably come up with something in 20 minutes and
Hmm.
tweak it here and there. But that's not the kind of list you're doing. You're deep diving these, like I said earlier, doing the research, doing the homework, teaching in the process, which I love, and I'm learning as well as I'm sure a lot of other people. I'm sure you're learning too as you sort of
Yep.
like you said, I know I heard you with the microturn. Like, I didn't realize he stole 30 something bases, and you know
Yeah.
what? I didn't either until you said it. So you taught me, right? And that's that's
Yeah.
that's that's the fun thing about the hobby. I don't care how much you know. There's always something you don't. We can all learn together, and you do a great job. So I don't have to tell you this, but continued success, and it'll be interesting to see the top 20. And you mentioned the guy that you mentioned. One that might get a few people's guff or omission or wherever they are, not ranked. So it's always fun.
Yeah, I welcome the conversation that it creates. So that it's part of what makes this fun for me. It's what I'm passionate about. It's what I've done pretty much my entire life to begin with. I'm just so thankful that there is a community out here on social media, on YouTube, podcasts, Instagram, and there is that sort of network of collectors out there that loves this stuff like I do. So I thank you, sir, for having me on. You're one of the first podcasts I found when I found this whole world, and it means a lot to me that you would reach out and have me on.
Well, I appreciate it. Let's do this if you're willing. We'll have you back on maybe when you get into the kind of winding it down and kind of come back on, do a wrap
Sure,
up and talk about other hobby stuff as well again. So
anytime.
all right, thanks, Al.
Thanks, John.